In 2018, amid calls to lower the political temperatures amongst the divergent factions, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga met and agreed to work together. The partnership, symbolized by a handshake and which represented the end of the political and election tussle, birthed the Building Bridges initiative, process that was spearheaded by them to build national discussion and consensus towards uniting Kenya. From observations as jurists, there are those that argue that the BBI task force report launched on October 21st, 2020 poses the risk of losing constitutional, legislative, and policy gains made in the last decade. Some posit BBI will identify the comprehensive changes that will strengthen the rule of law, unite Kenyans, deepen our constitutionalism, and launch a comprehensive reform process. Others argue that the BBI is a good initiative. However, it requires amendments out of the recommendations from different groups which should be factored in the report before subjecting it to the Kenyans for referendum. It is for this reason we have convened today's webinar so that we can interrogate the divergent perspectives. Join us on social media platforms as we discuss the constitutional, legal, and policy recommendations contained in the BBI report to achieve an objective analysis for the people of Kenya. Please post your questions, comments to our distinguished panelists who will be able to respond. To engage us in the discussions is a panel of distinguished jurists and legal practitioners who have immense understanding of the subject matter before us today. Allow me to briefly introduce them to you. We have Honorable Kivutha Kibwana, a professor who is the governor of Makueni County. He is serving his second term as the first governor of that county. He is also a teacher of law, a writer, a poet, and a defender of human rights. We also have Honorable Martha Karua. She is the chairperson of NAC Kenya. She has been a cabinet minister, a presidential candidate in 2013, a gubernatorial aspirant for Kirinyaga County in 2017. She's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and was awarded the Jurist of the Year award in 1999. We'll also be joined by Honorable Millie Odhiambo, a human rights activist. She's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, elected member of Mbita constituency, now Suba North constituency, and a defender of women's rights. We also have George Kegoro. He's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, a human rights expert, the executive director at Open Society Initiative for East Africa. He was the former executive director at ICJ Kenya and the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Karibuni. To our participants, please stay tuned as we tackle pertinent questions on BBI. We invite you to engage the panelists on the chat or question and answer section. Leave us your comments, your questions, or raise your hand if you would like us to call you during the plenary session. Please keep also engaging us on our social media platforms, on Twitter at ICJ Kenya and Facebook at kenyasections.icj. To kick off the discussion, allow me to start with our first general question for each panelist, and thereafter, I'll follow with the specific questions for each of them. I'll generally make a comment, a question that is going to be directed to all of you, that you'll be able to build that question so that you can be able to engage the public and everybody else with us today. And the two questions that I want to pose to the panelists. Number one, will the BBI report proposals help in achieving inclusivity in decision-making and governance? And number two, will the BBI solve the historical injustices, socioeconomic and political system problems that we have in Kenya? I'll start with you, Honorable Kivutha Kibwana. Just take it as a general view so that we can develop from there as we go deeper into the BBI report itself.
Thank you very much, moderator, and I also say thank you to ICJ for this very important discussion, actually a national part of the national conversation that we are trying to have. And I'm happy to be with my fellow panelists to speak on these issues. One of the major important things about discussing matters constitutional is actually to involve as many people in a country as possible. And that is why we say that constitution making is usually a people-driven process. BBI did start with two Kenyans, the president and the former president, who are in the electoral contest of 2017, the key contestants. And it was good that they were able to meet and to actually say that conflict shouldn't be escalated. And they came up with some 9 points. But I think what didn't happen is to broaden that initiative and to therefore make the process that they wanted to start, to make it inclusive. It is something that, first of all, we should have been told what is it that they discussed, where, did they want the country to go, so that initiative is owned by all Kenyans. And that's the beginning of inclusivity. And also, in terms of making it a constitutional process, because even Bwana Mwangi, the joint secretary, one of the joint secretaries, said initially the target was not to change the constitution, but that's something that happened along the way. The moment it did happen, I think it's always important to ask who wants the constitution changed, and how can, if that is necessary, how can therefore all Kenyans be part of that process? And I think that is one of the critical failures of the BBI process, because it is not seeking to incorporate, like the previous constitution making process from Yash Guy, Commission of Kenya Review Commission, Bomas, and those 20 years or more of a very inclusive process. I think it missed in terms of that. And currently, when it is said that the deal is done, and therefore there can't be, all these people are protesting, the religious sector, the governors, the MCS, the devolution family, the civil society. You see, it's important to be able to say that let us have a national conversation. Let us speak together instead of just saying, if you were not in initially, that's it. You can't be, you can't be in. And to make a legal process like there were, the processes before, a law which says how are we going to change our constitution to involve everybody, proper processes. Even during Zamba, the COE, there was another law, a process law. So it is that inclusivity, even before you begin to say the content of it, how is it making us promoting inclusivity, uniting the country. In terms of historical injustices, it avoided that. It avoided that substantially, because there were the land questions, the Ndungu report, and actually doesn't talk about the land issues at all. And that's one area which still continues to cry for address. It doesn't talk about the Kiplagat, the truth and justice, with Macau, and all that. So all those reports, the Krieglers, the Wakis, the whatever, actually there are none. Agenda, the original Agenda 4. If those reports were addressed, then we would substantially begin to say, yes, we can see some newness in terms of these proposals, extrajudicial killings, because there was the police reform, particularly in the slum areas and so on. So I think because maybe this process was hurried, that is why there hasn't been enough national discussion to be able to say that what do we want to really, what's the problem with our country? What ails us? How can we change it? And then we would get to the point of inclusivity, better governance being served by BBI, and the question of historical injustice, and therefore people would not be able to say, let us not entertain it. They would say that if this is to promote a national conversation to make us get to a better place, we will discuss seriously, and it will help our country. That's my take as of now.
Honorable Karua, I think you can take it up there so that we can position on that position also.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Honorable Karua, just taking out, we are continuing to the next panelist just to generally speak on that question.
Okay, I just wanted to come in and say that the first BBI report, which made the two principles, they weren't happy with it because nobody said they were unhappy, yet they sent the team back to prepare another report, had suggested a national conversation. And to that extent, they were right. We need a national conversation. But the current report, what it is proposing is actually an overthrow of the 2010 Constitution made after extensive consultation. And we are now being sort of blindfolded and forced onto constitutional amendments determined solely by the two BBI brothers, the president and the former prime minister, in a process that is exclusive, not inclusive. And that's why they can dare say there will be no discussion on the contents of the report. They want them amended as they are. Ironically, they are proposing to amend a document that was so consultative, the 2010 Constitution, but they don't want us to amend or discuss a mere report. Now, if you look at how the two BBI principles have been going about their business, BBI has made the government launch an assault on civil liberties, that the only people who can safely have political gatherings are those supporting BBI, and anybody perceived not to be supporting it, their meetings are disrupted for one reason or another. So clearly, this is not an inclusive enterprise, but it is an exclusive enterprise by two BBI brothers, and it is totally against the Constitution in the sense that it is not amending the Constitution following the only two routes known by the Constitution, that is either parliamentary or a people's initiative. At this stage, they are trying to make this a people's initiative by collection of signatures. But we all know that this is executive driven. How is it a people's initiative? If you look at what they want to do with the Constitution, it's really they want to overthrow it because they are introducing so many things. They are not bothered with implementing the Constitution. Our Constitution has very many areas, fundamental areas that are yet to be implemented. If I may begin with the issue of human rights, if we can still assault the civil liberties of Kenyans, of citizens, then clearly we have not internalized and implemented our Constitution. So if you look at the proposals, they are not meant to address historical injustices. It is like we are being returned to where we came from, where we did not even as citizens have a voice, and those who dared to speak out were intimidated. My view of the entire BBI drive is that it is a return to the dark days.
I hear you, Honorable Martha. George, I wanted to ask you specific questions as we build on that. Will the BBI solve the historical injustices, the socio-economic and political systematic problems in Kenya?
Okay, I think you can hear me now. So thank you very much. And It looks like a very compelling space that you've put together. So first of all, congratulations for that. So to get to that question, I think let me just speak a little bit about the context of BBI. The context of BBI is such that it will always be judged against the standards of the national mediation and dialogue process that followed the 2007 election. And why is it tempting to judge it against the standard, of the national dialogue process? Because BBI, like that process, is also a response to an electoral crisis. Because in 2007, the country came together, rallied around resolving an electoral crisis. When BBI came in 2017 after the elections, it conjured in the public minds of the country the idea that this is yet another crisis resolving problem, another crisis resolving mechanism similar to the one of 2007. But there are important differences between 2007 and 2017 that then are important to note and that affect how the public has come to view BBI. The first is that in 2007, the country was in a very hot political crisis. In 2017, there was a low-grade political crisis. The election had happened, the two swearings in had happened, and there was a stalemate. But you couldn't say that the country was in that level of active conflict the way that 2007 came about. So in that sense, the pressure to resolve problems was not as immediate in 2017 as in 2007. And therefore, the rallying of the country behind BBI was less than the rallying of the country around the problems of 2007. And that speaks to the question of inclusivity and participation, which was much less in 2017 than in 2007. The other significant difference is that in both 2017 and 2007, there was huge public outrage about what had happened. Shock, because the country never thought, Kenyans never thought, in addition to being outraged, they were shocked, but that they were this violent and that they were committing violence against one another. But by 2017, the fact that we can commit violence against one another had been confirmed, so the violence wasn't as shocking. The other very important issue is the level of the actors. In 2017, there were few. It's just the two BBI actors, as Martha has called them, the president and his brother, the Prime Minister Raila Odinga. But in 2007, as we all know, there were many actors on all sides, but there was also significant civil society actors, and there was also a significant level of internationalization of the crisis, and that also brought in those actors. Then there was an elaborate process, a discussion about process in 2007, but there wasn't an elaborate discussion about process. In 2017, a process was disclosed for the first time to the public by the two brothers, and then the process has been under revision on a fairly exclusive basis by the two authors of the process. The last important thing to say is that the 2007 process had an inbuilt guarantees about where it was coming from, and that the guarantee, the guarantor for 2007 was Kofi Annan, and the international actors that were that came into play, and to a significant extent, the civil society actors that were also part of the action for the mediation. Now, the importance of guaranteeing the process is because the public wants a level of confidence that there is a group of people whose that is on the lookout for the general public good, which politicians are not necessarily always capable of doing. Politicians first look after and for themselves and their own interests, and then after the public interest. So to the extent that we haven't had a process of who takes care of the public interest while politicians take care of their own interests, that affects what is happening in 2017. So the totality of that is that it has affected how people then get to view BBI and how get people to view to answer the question of whether or not BBI can solve the problem that it set out to solve and the question that you've asked me, Kelvin. My short answer is the following: that it is difficult to judge the substance of BBI without going into a judgment about the process of BBI, and the judgment as to issues of the public can happily contrast the inclusive and detailed and highly negotiated 2000 process from the exclusive, top-down and highly controlled process in 2017, where it becomes unclear as a result of how the controls have been established in 2017. One of the things that has been alleged is that in addition to the things that are being put out for public discussion, there's a fine print to BBI. There's what is written, but there's also a fine print to do with the personal interests of the main political actors. The fine print is both in what is written, but also in what is not written. So it is alleged, for example, that the political ambitions of certain actors will be enhanced if BBI is passed. It is also alleged that the political ambitions of certain other actors will be extinguished if BBI is passed. Now, because all those allegations belong to the fine print and are not written in the document, it is impossible to correctly judge that allegation. But our inability to judge that allegation affects the credibility of the process itself and affects the capacity of the public to believe that the process is in their interest. And all that goes down to the questions of how the process has been negotiated or positioned from the beginning up to where it stands now.
Thank you, Georgia. I want to pose some specific questions on the proposals that we have. And I need to ask, which BBI proposals enhance the rule of law, justice, and better governance in Kenya? And also, which recommendations are not necessary? Then the final question that I'll be putting up now for the general, you can take 10 minutes each so that you can give a broad view on these questions. It's finally to ask and let our viewers know, does the BBI report require further public participation or consultation to achieve consensus on the divergent views? And if so, what amendments should be prioritized? And I want you to also look at a few items that ICJ has also taken into account. For example, the question of the IEBC, the judiciary ombudsman, the position on, including certain ethos in the constitution, and certain factors, like giving salaries and remuneration commission further powers into the determining professional bodies' fees and things like that, which are going to make certain of the Advocates Act, for example, to be unconstitutional. Just generally, what will be your view on these issues? And finally, Professor, I'll be asking you whether the proposals in the BBI, will they affect devolution, and do they strengthen or weaken devolution? I'll start with you, Honorable Kibwana.
That's quite many questions, but it's for all of us, of course. And I'm really very happy, with the discussion, so far. And I just forgotten to add in terms of historical injustice, I think one of the things that we have never done as a country is to take stock of since independence, how has the government and even broadly the state treated all areas in terms of if it's infrastructure, road infrastructure, if it is in terms of education, if it in terms of all those things that make development to happen. Because before you take stock of that, you cannot actually, strictly speaking, talk even about inclusivity, particularly development inclusivity from the development point of view. So we need to look at all the budgets since independence. How have those budgets treated all areas of our country? If you look at the road network, if you look at the schools, if you look at the health facilities, if you look at all those things, so that you can now begin to say whatever we do in terms of devolution money, CDF money, and all that kind of stuff, then you are actually beginning to equalize the country so that you put it at the level where whatever else now we do, it is clear that we are going forward together. I think for me that is an important conversation that we have never had before, even as we talk about equalization fund and so on, which areas truly require equalization fund, that is that special budgetary allocation on the basis of real data, not conjecture. I think one thing that George mentioned about the differences of 2017 and 2007-8, there's a big role of the Supreme Court, because in 2013, the reason that election did not elicit either violence, major conflict and so on, is because the Supreme Court pronounced on it. And as a result, it was difficult for a player to now go beyond the Supreme Court decision after they had subjected themselves to the court, and the court had made a decision. Of course, the decision, many people have said it was not a correct decision, and usually when there are decisions in courts, we criticize them because we are allowed to do that, particularly in the academic field and so on. Even 2017, the Supreme Court also intervened. And as a result, I think that is why you couldn't go to the situation that happened in 2007-8, because there was that other actor who was a participant. And so I would emphasize the role of also the courts in all this, particularly when the real issue, and I am coming now to the rule of law and justice, when the real issue is why are there these endemic problems in our country? Is it true that there is no inclusivity, or is it the situation of people not accepting results? And why do people not accept results? And what guarantee is there, even if BBI was passed, that people would accept results? So I think we need to go into that question of how do we design our elections so that the result is a just result, it reflects the will of the people. And if we can crack that, so that the system delivers a genuine election and genuine results, and we agree that we are not going to steal elections. I don't know whether we can agree on that, because if we steal elections, we say that is a norm in Kenya to steal elections, to compromise elections, particularly if you are in the state. Then it means that BBI or whatever we do will not cure that. It's a new culture of saying that we will accept electoral results. There'll be a fair process. Like now in BBI, if you say that the political parties are going to appoint electoral commissioners, about the majority of them, like if there are 7 to appoint 4, and these are parliamentary parties. So you're saying the dominant political parties, and particularly in this transition, which will basically be Jubilee and ODM, they will appoint most of those of the four, most of those commissioners. And when they do that, the conflict will be transferred now into the Electoral Commission, because if it disagrees, then of course the elections will not be legitimate. So I think we really need to go back and say the current constitution, how are these people appointed? How can they be appointed so that they are not subsequently captured by the players? And if we can crack the question of an electoral commission and all the other processes in the election, the entire election, which give us a free and fair election, and even if things like the server or whatever it is that the results are where they are placed, we say that like a group of religious sectors will have access to those ones and they will look, because why hide anything? Because the elections are supposed to be, democratic. If we can really focus on that, then that will help us. Is it true that the current, the suggestion of the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Ministers, therefore having 5 positions, and maybe if representatives from the major ethnic groups are in that, are in those positions, then they will not fight because they will have access to the state. I think, first of all, that may not be fair because we have 44 of us in terms of ethnic communities. If we want to base our democracy on ethnicity, and that is failing in Ethiopia currently. So even if we were to agree that we should have a formulation like that, first of all, we must ask ourselves, in the current formulation, is there real power in the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Ministers? The Deputy Prime Ministers can be sacked by the President. If you are sacked from being a minister, you lose being Deputy Prime Minister. The Prime Minister will be appointed by the President, but from the majority of the majority party or coalition. And if the President is the leader of the majority party, therefore it means that they have to identify somebody else. And even somebody who is a presidential candidate can also become a prime minister if they are part of a majority coalition. So there is confusion there, and that all those 5 people also, it is still the president who has the real power, and at independence, when we had that formulation of a prime minister and then the Queen's representative or the governor general who was to be the president, the prime minister had substantive power, and when we come to the Yash guy formulation, again you find there the prime minister has substantial power and the deputies as well. If you come to the Bombers draft, the same. If you come to the Zamba, the COE harmonized draft, all those, and even to some extent the half-law of government after the ethnic violence of 2007-8, that's where also the prime minister didn't have significant power, and there was that conflict as well. They were supposed to consult, and what was consultation and so on. So even Bombers, if it was truly wanting to make sure that power is dispersed, it is shared in the executive, then there would have been a stronger system of the prime minister like those previous drafts. So even in terms of rule of law, in terms of justice, constitutionalism, when, and others will speak on this because all of us are speaking on them, and later I'll talk about devolution and the BBI. You find that all these issues of the judiciary, it is clear. It is clear that there is a process of what you do with judges who are errant. It is within the existing constitution. So why try to bypass that? Because judges must be given the comfort of making decisions which even are against the executive, are against citizens, are against the private sector, they're against everybody, if it is the law that they are following. So to say that there will be an ombuds person when there is already one for all the public officials in terms of the Commission of Administrative Justice. Already, that exists on top of the tribunal system of dealing with the judiciary and even the internal judiciary system of disciplining each other. We must guard the independence of the judiciary. And we have heard the executive saying that they will deal with the judiciary after 2017 judgment. In our country, that separation of power is so important. I think Kenya is one of the surviving democracies courtesy of the 2010 constitution. And if this is changed so that we go down the African path of dictatorship and all that, it's not just Kenyans who will lose, also the continent will lose. Our Eastern African Central region will lose. So if there was discussion, as people keep on insisting, because the moment you say that let us discuss this BBI thing broadly, as George was hinting, Martha was also stating, if we have this discussion and we agree that we must change certain things, that should happen, because nobody is saying that we can't change things in our country to make it better. But the moment you begin to say that there are things to be discussed, you are pigeonholed and you are told that there is the president and the brother on the one side, there is the deputy president, and anybody else who says that we must sit and discuss. For me, for people in the civil society, for academic people, for people who are saying that let us have a national dialogue. In actual fact, that national dialogue is so important because of all the issues that we have had, and we have never had a true national dialogue. And we stop this pigeonholing, and we stop so that we are faithful to our country, we are faithful to our people. But later on, I can also talk about other specific issues, but my colleagues are there also. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, before we proceed further, I wanted to introduce our fourth panelist, Honorable Millie Odhiambo. Honorable Millie Odhiambo, the Member of Parliament for Suba East, and who is a great defender of women's rights. And I think I need to bring her up to speed. Honorable Odhiambo, the issue that we have had variously said is that representation of women, if you remember the question of the gender equity issue that we have been pursuing for the last several years, and which led to the Honorable Chief Justice make a recommendation to His Excellency the President to dissolve Parliament. What I wanted to know, and what the public want to know, is has this issue been tackled in these proposals that we have? And do you think that the way it's going to be worked in the Senate, does it fulfill the needs and aspiration to ensure that women have their fair share of the cake in this country?
Good morning, and sorry for logging in a bit late. I was technologically challenged there for a while. I also regret that I've missed opening remarks by Martha Karua, and I got a little bit from Kegoro. And when I logged in, actually, from the little I got from Kegoro, is before I speak to the issue of the women, whether it's covered or not, I just want to say that the challenge we are facing right now with BBI is there's too much speculation, as Kegoro says. And as usual, because this is both a legal and a political process, we can't run away from that it is both legal and political process. And because it's a political process, there will be a lot of addition of things which are not necessarily true, which are falsehoods and all that. And the other issue that I picked from Kegoro is that we are very nostalgic about 2007-8 period in the run-up basically to the 2010 Constitution. And in that nostalgia, which I'm almost also falling victim to, we still want things to be done the way we were doing a comprehensive review of the Constitution, where we were overhauling the Constitution and coming up with one, and it had a different architecture, how that bill is coming. But what we are forgetting is this Constitution provides a way of amendment of the Constitution. And what the BBI process did was actually go beyond the constitutionally provided process and allow public participation even before, after the handshake, because we sometimes also forget under what circumstances this came up. And it came up because of the challenges we are facing post-election. And when the president and my party leader, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, came up with a handshake, they said, well, we've been bedeviled with all these things, despite even having passed a constitution. How do we deal with some of these thorny issues? And then they said, well, our view is this could be the issue, but can we get the general view of the public? And the matter was sent out to the public, and those who wanted to give views gave their views. I personally represented the Suba people and gave my views in relation to BBI. Some of my views were taken, some of them were not taken. And part of the view that was not taken and which have been informed because of the opposite view that is overwhelming coming from the public, which is largely expected. The public does not want largely the representation of women, which is largely expected when you are dealing with the marginalized or minority communities, that when it is put as a standalone issue, especially to the public, it is not likely to draw a lot of support. And so because of that, some of the views I wanted were taken in, some of them were not taken in. And I just want to say that it is within that context that then when we say that let us continue debating, we must be alive to the fact that the Constitution now has an inbuilt process going forward of taking those views. Of course, if the political class agrees, there's nothing stopping further political engagement, but that would actually be negotiated politically. But legally, the process is very clear. How you deal with amendments using a parliamentary initiative or using a popular initiative. And if that process starts, then there's also public participation, both at county levels and at parliamentary levels. So the public voice is not really shut. But then, of course, there's nothing, as I've said before, stopping the political class in engaging politically, not legally. But having said that, I also just want to say that, and I'm hoping, I know the time may look like it's a lot, but the time might be short. But I want to talk about, if you look at the issue of the women's agenda, and I'm glad Honorable Martha Karua is here. And if you look at what the proposal was, original proposal would have enabled us to get the 2/3 gender role ab initio, but we received so much opposition from men. I was actually agenda headliner, and Martha, I even have that photo today, which I took with Martha. On that day, we agreed because on most of the issues, me and Martha were on opposing views in the Parliamentary Select Committee, including the system of governance. Martha was very strong about one system, and I was very strong about a different system. But when it came to the women's issues, and most people were actually expecting us to be disagreed on different issues, but somehow, as people were waiting for the white smoke, but somehow we passed everything until it came a headline with one or two of us we refused that unless we have the complete 2/3, it's not going to pass. But Martha said, let us negotiate. And I remember it was mainly Martha and Charity, and I thank you for the wisdom of having been here longer than some of us. And Martha said, sometimes take what is there and give room to fight for more at a later time. And that is how we actually agreed. I was wearing a yellow blouse. Martha was wearing a green suit. I have that photo today because for me it was very memorable that we managed to get some representation for women. Having done that, we did not manage 2/3, and we've gone back to Parliament and we've tried to get all manner of ways to get it passed, and we have failed. What has this done? We made presentation as women. I made presentation even when I was representing the Suba community about it, and they were very clear. They told us they are facing challenge because the public are saying, complaining about the huge public bill and all that. Now, if you look at what is provided right now, in the Senate, we have 18 positions for women. What is proposed is do away with that and bring 47. If that happens, then it means we will have a plus of 39. And what about the National Assembly? We have 47 plus 6 nominated. That gives us 53. The proposal, I'm not counting the elected positions because that would of course change depending on who is elected. The proposal is remove the 53. And if you remove the 53, it means we will have a gain of 39 in the Senate and a loss of 53 in the National Assembly, which gives us a net loss of 14. There's a proposed 70 seats, and the proposed 70 seats is also seeking not just the gender issue, but to deal with the issue of equality of the vote, so that the populous areas that were not properly represented in the last time, based on a political negotiation, then can also be added. And if we take that into account, for me, the crux of the issue right now, for me as a woman, is if we stand at 14, at a net loss of 14, and we get 14 from the 70, it will put us at status quo. If any number that is increased beyond 14 will be a gain. And then with that, if you then look at Parliament as a whole, depending on how many numbers we get from the 70, we may be able to get the 2/3. But if you look at the National Assembly as a unit on its own, then we may not necessarily get the 2/3. And for me, therefore, the crux of the matter lies in the 70. Since you limited my discussion to the gender issue, perhaps I'll leave it at that, since I don't know how you've been proceeding, so that I don't spoil the process. Thank you.
I will come back to the main other issues, and the gender question I put specifically because a question was addressed to you. But we will want to broaden the discussions. Right now, we talked about the questions that deal with both the rule of law, justice, better governance, and the questions of public consultations. And I think I'll take this back to Honorable Karua and George, one after the other. We can have about 5 minutes each on those issues. Then I'll come back to you, Honorable Odhiambo, so that you can also touch on these issues. They affect you as much as they affect everybody else. And I think your perspective was also good to clear up certain issues that maybe blinding other people from seeing the issues the way they're supposed to. Honorable Karua.
Now, I need to mention something on the gender rule before we lose the thread. And I would like to say that it is true that the proposals are giving women gender parity in Senate, but in a weakened Senate. Remember, Senate was put there as the guardian angel of the counties. This Senate has now as proposed by BBI, is a weakened Senate that does not adequately have a say on money matters touching on counties. So the weakened Senate is given gender parity. The strengthened parliament, women are outed and merely admits it's a loss. There is no mechanism given of how to make the not more than 2/3 gender rule implemented in parliament. And we all remember that although we did not get a method in Naivasha during the 2010 review of achieving gender parity or 2/3 gender rule in parliament, we put in the principle of not more than 2/3 gender rule, making it mandatory and giving parliament the responsibility of ensuring that it is implemented. And for failure to do that, this current parliament, the 12th parliament, has been shown the red card, courtesy of the advisory by the Chief Justice. They cannot, in my view, participate in constitutional review or pass any legislation. Having been shown the red card, like players, they should just leave this match, come back later. We need an election to bring in members of parliament who can delve into these issues. Now, if I could go to the issue, if Mr. Mogeni, you could now kindly remind me the issue you had touched on, because I really was burning on the gender question.
I know that's good, but you see what we were discussing is whether the proposals that are contained in the rule in the BBI do they enhance the rule of law? Do they promote justice and better governance? And what, for example, recommendations do you think are not necessary in the whole process?
Okay, thank you. Now, they do not enhance the rule of law. Look at the proposals with regard to the judiciary. The judicial ombudsman appointed by the president is sort of like the government inspector. For those who have read Nikolai Gogol's book, The Government Inspector, it's the hand of the executive coming into the Judicial Service Commission, where judges and magistrates are the majority of the commissioners. And this government inspector, aka ombudsman, is the one who will investigate and recommend their staying in the judiciary or their exit. So sort of intimidating them, and the executive having a very large say in the judiciary via this government inspector, also known as ombudsman. And I think this assaults the cardinal principle and cardinal design of our constitution of separation of powers. A presidential system has strict separation of powers. And once you get the executive's hand in the judiciary, and remember that executive has already got appointees in the Judicial Service Commission, so we are strengthening the executive's hand. This does not augur well for checks and balances. You look at the police. Currently, they have an independent chair of the National Police Service Commission, who is a civilian. Now they are bringing in a cabinet minister to chair the National Police Commission. Already, the police who are supposed to be independent are being compromised by orders from the executive. Now, removing the independence that they have in the Constitution makes them much more vulnerable to executive interference. And this will be a drawback on the rule of law, on fairness and justice. We've already seen the police disrupting meetings of those seen not to favor BBI and giving security only in meetings of those who are pro-BBI. So you can see clearly that the proposals are not going to enhance justice or the rule of law. When it comes to the IEBC, the proposals are to share out the commissioners, 4 commissioners out of 7. That is a majority. You can take it for granted that when parliamentary political parties are asked to share, it's the majority parties who share. In this case, it will be Jubilee and ODM. Why would we have two parties deciding on the referee? This does not fix the perennial question of the electoral process. For me, fixing the electoral process means properly, fully implementing Article 86 and Article 10 to make elections fair, transparent, accountable, verifiable. And in Article 10, to bring in public participation so that the same liaison committee we have at the national level can be devolved to the county level, and the major stakeholders or all the stakeholders participate in planning the elections at the county level. And the election officials stop being beholden to the IEBC or to the government of the day, and they know that their supervisor is the people, the stakeholders within the county. One can have a fuller discussion on that on a different day, but these are things to show you that there will not be fairness and justice. And when the Electoral Commission is controlled by politicians, things will not be better. We tried it in 1997 during IPPG, and KANU agreed to give the opposition 10 out of the 22 commissioners. Moi was still able to rig, because it's not about the individuals who man the commission. It's about the process. We've got to fix the process. Then other issues is introducing ministers in parliament to be from among members of parliament. I was in parliament for the longest time when this process of amending or overhauling our constitution was on. And from what we had observed, the executive was controlling parliament by sitting in parliament. We therefore wanted a parliament that did not have the executive. How then can we change the structure of the executive in our constitution by mixing the executive with parliament without going back to the people? Who demanded this? Is it the people or is it the two BBI brothers? I am saying that what is being proposed is so fundamental. These are not amendments. This is a spirited attempt to overthrow the 2010 document. You gave me 5 minutes. Let me stop there. But there are many more things I could show.
We'll come back to you.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you in the meantime. George, I think I still take you back to the same questions, your perspective from the civil society and the gains we have so far made. What do you think we can reiterate in terms of what we have gained under the 2010 Constitution?
Okay, let me just speak to the question that there's this question that has been spoken to around the proposed judiciary ombudsman and the question of political inclusion, and those are linked, as I will try and show. So under the 2010 Constitution, we made a decision, we made the choice towards the judicialization of politics when the Constitution established the Supreme Court to arbitrate presidential electoral disputes. So this judicialization is the process is the reliance on judicial bodies to resolve core political issues. The judiciaries are not necessarily better prepared to deal with those types of political disputes. It's just that there's nobody else that is more trusted than them, and that is how in our country, for better or worse, we established a Supreme Court and gave them this marquee extraordinary jurisdiction to resolve the presidential election petition. Now, in 2013, after the first presidential election, under the Supreme Court, the result was criticized very heavily. And in 2017, the Supreme Court overturned a presidential election. Now, one thought that as a result of the Supreme Court overturning the presidential election, because it was then doing what it had been established to do, the political actors would accept that result and maybe go back to the drawing boards and hold another election as the Supreme Court had ordered in good faith. Instead, what we saw was a very, very significant political backlash against the Supreme Court. That backlash did not end in 2017. It has continued, and it is not unrelated to the idea of establishing an ombudsman. So what does that mean? So how does that speak to what the country has been trying to do? It communicates that the idea that the judiciary should be a player in resolving a core political question as negotiated into the 2010 constitution is now, there's some kind of political doubt around it. The political doubt was first brought in by the stigmatization of the Supreme Court after 2017, that has continued into a denial of budget and so on and so forth, and that now is signified by the ombudsman. That means that there will be a layer of political control of the Supreme Court when the court is supposed to be independent and to be a political actor in elections. So what was negotiated as a mechanism for addressing a core political problem for the country is in the process of being abridged in a manner that one wouldn't say is as negotiated as it now as it first was under the new constitution. And how does that speak to the question of inclusivity? Now, my mwalimu Kivuta Kibona has talked about how the formulation now is, how people view the BBI formulation, which is to do that the big five ethnic communities will sit under the table, share the spoils of the country, and then it will be okay to move forward. The fear then becomes, if the spoils are shared that way, and there's a Supreme Court that does not agree with that sharing, it could end up jeopardizing that arrangement. So you must, first of all, then find a way of addressing an independent, the independence of the Supreme Court. So the idea that you have an independent judiciary suddenly becomes a threat to what is being planned at a political level. The question that Mwalimu asked was, if you have sort of the big ones at table sharing the spoils, what about the rest? So that speaks to the question of inclusivity, and exclusivity is being staged by weakening the Supreme Court that would have had a view about who is in and who is out. My view is that the questions of elections must have winners and losers. That is very important. Some people must lose elections. It is important that people lose elections. It is also important that people win elections. When people lose elections, they campaign, they gain clarity, and they become better at trying to get back to power, and the public gains. You can't have a situation where you have elections and nobody is capable of losing those elections because of the political arrangements are such that everybody is buffered and everybody is perpetually in power. The problem that is being attempted of sort of expanding the executive, it has been criticized because we don't want to go into the pain of organizing free and fair elections where people are capable of losing and actually getting out of power. Then let's have a situation where everybody somehow can't lose power, have such a big and expanded political leadership that it has a space for everybody. So there's nobody out there complaining. All the important voices that are capable of complaining that they've been edged out of power, there'll be something, there'll be a sinecure for them in political office so that we are all happy here and there's nobody out there complaining. I think that kind of system is can't be what the public wants. The public expects and wants to see winners. There's a meaning for winning elections. There's also a good meaning for people losing elections, because the fair political competition promotes better public service. That I will stop there.
We'll take that from there, and back to you, Mimi, that you had raised the questions you wanted to look at what we discussed earlier, so far back. Just to direct you to certain questions, and I know you'll have more to say on what has been said by the speakers. What I wanted to ask you, in this proposal under the BBI, do you think they require any further consultation, and whether, as they have been set out, they are fully comprehensible without any need to go back to it? And also, ask yourself, as you discuss, whether the BBI report solves the historical injustices, socio-economic and political systematic problems that we have had in Kenya over the period. Over to you, Mary.
Hello. I'm presuming, I'm sorry I missed you out because of the internet. So I'm presuming the question was to me.
Yes, the question really touched on what the current BBI proposals that we have. Do you think that they require further consultations, and whether there are any necessary recommendations that can be made to make it any better? And also the further issue that I wanted to bring you up to speed on what we discussed earlier, whether the BBI that we have, the proposal we have, whether they solve the historical injustices, the socio-economic and political systematic problems we've had in Kenya over time. Do you think that has been addressed adequately in this report?
Thank you. Maybe before I answer to that, I just wanted to clarify something that Honorable Mata has said. On the issue of whether it is a loss to National Assembly on the gender issue, I said it would be, not that it is, it would be a loss. If all the 76 went to men, that would be a loss. But if even 15%, I mean not 15, even if only 15 got women, then we'll have gotten one gain. And so for me, the crux of the matter is how many of these seats will go to women. And if you get 50 of them, it's a very tremendous gain for women. So for me, that is actually the crux of the matter. How many of those numbers will go for women, will go to women. Secondly, the other issue I just wanted to respond to is that Mata has said that we're actually having women going to a weekend Senate. I've actually looked at the BBI report quite a bit, especially since people keep harping on a weekend Senate. And the only justification I can see is that it is getting weakened because women are increased, which I don't think would really make sense. If you actually look at Dora and Kara have actually been strengthened. The challenges that we've been having between our Assembly and Senate that has even resulted in delay of funds to the counties has actually been strengthened. So for me, the Senate has actually been strengthened, not weakened. And therefore, the women are going into a strengthened Senate, and they can also hold the counties accountable, just like their male colleagues. So there is no weakened Senate, there's actually a strengthened Senate. Because what makes the Senate strong is the ability to make decisions about finances, and especially in relation to the counties. And where we used to have a ping pong is because there was no clarity about time, about process in the monies that were going between Senate and National Assembly. And that has been sorted out in the proposals by BBI. Having said that, I also just wanted to say that that had already spoken to the issue, whether there's a need for further consultation. And I want to tell you that I'm alive to the fact that this is both a legal and a political process. And for the legal process, I would say there would be no need for further consultation, because for the legal process, you can proceed and get signatures. Anybody can do that. Even Kegoro, if he wants right now, he can proceed. And 6 signatures, the way Honorable Ekuru, our court actually did at some point. So any of us can do that. It's a legal process. Nonetheless, there's nothing stopping the political class from talking to each other politically. It's a democratic country, and politicians can talk to each other. And if we fail to talk, there will be nothing unconstitutional and illegal in proceeding with the collection of signatures and the process as it is. Then I would want to, I would say personally that being a person who comes from a background of civil society, I encourage any political negotiations and discussions. I am not averse to political discussions and negotiations. Nonetheless, we must be aware that because it's a political process, there will always be political interests that will try and cloud and shadow this. The other day I was listening to news, and I saw 4 different groups that were coming and saying they are opposing the BBI. But it was actually one group mutating into 4, so that the voices can be very loud and clear, as though it is many, many people. They were coming as pastoralists, same group. Fishermen, same group. Dancers, same group. So let us also be alive to those kind of realities, that there are people who may actually want to derail the process by further consultation. But where there is need for genuine political discussions, I don't see why I would discourage genuine political discussions, but where it appears that we are not genuine about the discussions, then each of us can move with any amendment that we want legally and constitutionally. Maybe I can also add to that by indicating that I listened to one sector that was saying we are not supporting this BBI and we want discussions. And why did they not want the BBI? They listed the reason they didn't want the BBI. I don't want to say which group it was. And they basically said they don't want the entire BBI. So it's either their way or the highway. But if you don't want this, then just bring yours and proceed with it. Because what they were basically saying is they were opposing everything and saying they want negotiations about how they are opposing everything. So at some point, the discussions have to stop and the public will make a decision, because there is a whole process that even if the National Assembly, because we have representatives after the counties, should it pass the counties and it goes to National Assembly can decide to defeat it. If that happens, it goes back for a referendum. So either way, really, there has to be a process upon which we stop. But getting back to the issue of socioeconomic issues, whether it is covered, yes, there are even amendments that are calling on the strengthening on socioeconomic rights, that even when you are talking about the World Development Fund, focus is actually indicated that they will show that there is socioeconomic rights. And even when we are talking about the monetary part, Ondora and Kara, that they will be shown whether they are socioeconomic rights. But beyond the Constitution, we are also forgetting that BBI has also spoken to other administrative and legislative issues. And there are a raft of proposals that are administrative and legislative that have been proposed under BBI. So it's not just the Constitution. The challenge is that we are only focusing on the Constitution, but there are very, very many excellent ideas that have been proposed as legislation, which do not necessarily require constitutional amendments. But on socioeconomic rights, there are actually 2 proposed amendments that I've seen. There could be more, but I've seen 2 proposed constitutional amendments that are strengthening the issue of socioeconomic rights. And maybe I also just wanted to indicate, for purposes of clarity, that so long as, and if you want to remain true to the rule of law, if a matter is pending before court, then you cannot actually say, and where the court has actually pronounced itself on an issue where Parliament was supposed, the president was asked to send Parliament home. But the matter is in court, and the court has actually stopped that process. So with the due respect, I cannot say that that Parliament has no mandate. It will have the mandate once the court process. It will have no mandate once that court process is over, if you are true to the rule of law. And then I would also I just wanted to comment on the issue of the judicial ombudsman. And I would be worried if the judicial ombudsman was a standalone institution away from the Judicial Service Commission. But the fact that it is within the Judicial Service Commission as a lone voice does not give me any worry at all. As a person committed to human rights and the rule of law, I would be worried if it was a standalone body that makes decisions and passes those decisions alone. But this is a body that is only giving recommendations, that is one. And secondly, what I see the role of this ombudsman as is to provide an nexus with the public who may be fearful of the judiciary. And not only that, it is also facilitative as an agency and administrative, but does not, there's no way one individual can overrun an entire institution. In fact, from the discussions we are having, we are actually setting up such a body to receive a hostile reception when they go to the judiciary, the Judicial Service Commission, which then basically then would enhance their role. And then maybe finally, I can also just mention that I'd indicated earlier that Martha and I were, when we were in the Parliamentary Select Committee, we supported different parliamentary systems and have been consistent from the beginning that then not even in the constitution, not all the things I wanted were taken on board. One of them was that I was a strong proposer of ministers in Parliament. Having now served under the different systems, I can tell you for a fact that it is much better having ministers within Parliament. My only worry is that the BBI talks of may, which basically means they may not even be picked from Parliament. Personally, I would prefer stronger wording for them to be picked within Parliament, because it enables us to interrogate them directly, hold them accountable directly, and also deal with issues of representation much easier and directly when you have ministers within the House. And for me, actually, what we need to do, and I come from the natural school of thought, that the law was made for man and not man for the law. We need to implement things that work for the public. And that is why, for instance, even though people say that it goes against separation of powers, I fully support CDF and I fully support the World Fund, because it is one of the things that has worked for the country. And Kenya needs to come up with a system, even if it is sui generis, but works for the country, and that enables us to progress forward. And not only adhere to rules and standards for the sake of, but when they do not serve us. And on the big ethnic communities, will they share the 5 positions? Let us look at what is happening. Adan Duale was majority leader. On our side, we have Juliet Mohammed. That's the political reality. I'm sorry for taking that much time.
Sorry. I come back to you, Professor Kibwana. What I needed to ask you, and I think as we move forward, there are many issues that have been raised by Honorable Millie Odhiambo that we're going to speak to. Of course, we without losing sight of what we have in mind, we have got about 40 minutes left to wind up. But Honorable Kibwana, I wanted to ask specifically on questions of devolution. What do you think that this process of BBI has strengthened or weakened the devolution process?
I think that's a very critical question, but let me very quickly just also respond to the gender question. Already in the county assemblies, it was sorted out through Article 177. So one wonders why there was, some other routes which have not even delivered the gender issue. So why didn't we go back to the existing constitution vis-a-vis the county assemblies and simply use that or innovate using that, so that we arrive at that minimum? Because even the 1/3 in terms of either gender in elective and appointive offices, that is the minimum. When you go to Rwanda, it is more, and all that, because the women are even the bigger population, and there are issues which a particular gender, a particular age, like young people also being involved in leadership, they bring to the table, and they help the country in terms of moving forward. So for me, I believe that it's not necessarily rocket science, but as currently is in Parliament, you cannot achieve it through BBI. And if you can't achieve it through BBI, it means that now BBI will be used to change the portions of the constitution which say there must be that to the third gender rule. So that actually now BBI will be negating the gender rule, because in its present formulation it can't achieve it. Also, just to say, my friend Kegoro, the judicialization of politics, when you bring the Supreme Court to be able to adjudge electoral contests at the presidency level, because I thought the question is, has an election followed the law? And if that is the question that the Supreme Court or the High Court or whoever is judging, then that shouldn't be politics. It is just, as an election followed the law, and assuming that there is good law, electoral law. So I was just struggling to understand that concept. Of course, we know there is the political question matter in law, when something is clearly a political thing, and then the judges will say that should be sorted out at the political arena. Just to say also, what BBI proposes is actually a radical change of the constitution, because even in terms of the articles, BBI is looking at 67 of the about 264 articles and schedules, just by virtue of the numbers, let alone the import of some of those decisions. And some of them, like an example Mother gave of the Judicial Service Commission, the way it is going to be restructured. For example, for the advocates, it is said that if you go into the Judicial Service Commission, you cannot practice the law. You must suspend your practice of the law, which means the senior people will not come into it anymore because they don't want to stop practicing the law, and you'll get younger advocates. And of course, the Judicial Service Commission is so important in terms of the choice of the next Chief Justice. So you can see that there is tinkering of some of the provisions of the current constitution to also achieve a certain result. And also, Millie, whom we worked with very, very closely in terms of civil society work, and it's somebody who really, in the gender movement, is very well respected. When you differentiate and you say that there are legal issues in terms of changing the constitution, and there are political issues, the political process, and the political process, politicians, I would imagine, can continue in it. Does a political process exclude citizens? Because I thought the Article 1 of sovereignty really says that the real power, and if one can say the real politics, it's the citizens. They drive that, and the electors and the supervisors and so on. So I was also trying to understand that dichotomy. Coming to devolution, the truth of the matter is, first of all, we should, before we wanted to change the constitution, we should have said, can we have a status report of the implementation of the current constitution, so that we can see the shortfalls, we can say that because of these shortfalls, we need to change it. Also, we should have asked ourselves, what is the status of devolution? And the truth of the matter is, like as governors, we were in Mombasa, where we looked at like agriculture. And most of the money in agriculture up to today stays at the national level. Most of the money in terms of health stays at the national level. And yet those are devolved functions. You remember the judiciary striking down, I think it was 24 laws which were passed without participation of Senate. And if we look at how the judiciary has intervened through COG and through other actors to actually annul laws that are attacking the devolution and are attacking the current constitution, it has been, you know, there's been a lot of that activity. So we have not been faithful to the current constitution. And therefore, even in terms of devolution, there is a lot which we could achieve or could have achieved and can achieve if we truthfully and faithfully implement the
we have lost you, Professor. I don't know what happened to the but I think as we get Professor back, kindly, Martha, could you maybe address some of the issues that have been raised by Millie and cap up what?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Martha, you can hold on. We can just go ahead. Go ahead, Prof.
Okay. So in terms of devolution, like up to now, we have not received money for, we're in the process of receiving money for September and October. And before that, we even for June of last year, we had not received money in the new financial year. And we stayed when Senate and National Assembly were haggling. So at the grassroots, devolution was on life support. And now we continue not to pay salaries. You know, the health people say that they'll go on strikes because they're not getting money, PPEs, and so on and so forth. And even this 35%, there's no reason why we cannot get 35% now. If cabinet set with, you know, national treasury, the 35%, there's only a minimum. Of course, it is good to have it in the constitution. And even with that, with the debt, we will have to have a mechanism for making the money available. So there are many things which are in BBI, which can actually be done without a constitutional change. And even if there are all those other laws that Millie talked about, first of all, you do the constitution, then you look at those other laws so that they are in consonance with the constitution. So you can't do them simultaneously because there will be a problem. First of all, if we are going to support devolution, let us agree that devolution is entrenched and it will be respected by the national executive, and it will support the four agendas of the president, because health, agriculture, you know, those are some of the major ones. And we say we commit to implementing the constitution, we commit to implementing devolution, and we commit, as has been said by Kegoro, that in elections there will be losers and there will be, you know, winners. And it is to accept when you lose, but you must lose fairly. So we fix, what does losing fairly, you know, fairly mean? And Martha talked about that. Because even if we don't, if we disagree, we don't accept that when we lose, we must accept we have lost. We shall continue to having these problems. Every time I lose, I will say, I didn't lose. And we shall have, you know, those problems. The World Development Fund, through legislation, that you can have it. It's not a big deal. And in some counties, like in Mokweni, every county gets more than what is suggested in devolution. In BBI, they get 33 million shillings every ward. So that can be done through legislation, and the CDF also exists. Of course, in terms of implementation, under normal circumstances, it is the executive which implements, so that there's oversight by the parliament and so on. So I think a lot of the things, actually, we have to ask ourselves, what is new in BBI which cannot be done without constitutional change? Because even the inclusivity at the executive level, what is to prevent the executive, the president saying that the communities in Kenya, the counties in Kenya, there will be minimum one cabinet secretary, one CAS, one permanent secretary. That can be done if it is equity that we want to achieve, and also all those commissions. It is something that can happen, and we can of course look at the population because that's an important parameter in devolution, in democracy. So we have not done enough work to implement the existing constitution to be democratic, to practice and give strength to devolution. So every time we are not doing, as I conclude, every time we are not doing what we should do according to the constitution, we say we need to change the constitution. That will not help us.
I hear you. Honorable Martha, maybe you can cap up on that.
For electoral justice, let us fix the electoral system, the electoral process. We cannot cure this by creating additional seats. I therefore fully agree with Governor Kibwana that elections must produce a winner and a loser. It's the process that we have been questioning. Number two, what we need to fix in Kenya is our political culture, not the laws. We have changed the laws many, many times. We haven't gotten there yet because we subvert the very laws that we change. For instance, I have said that this BBI is not even being done within the law. I firmly believe that a people's initiative cannot be started by the executive. And BBI has been a project of the executive with mainly the president, with his BBI brother, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister. They have used public funds. It is therefore not right for Millie to say we can go start our initiatives. We can, and probably we are already doing that. But you cannot spend public funds and not expect to be accountable to the people. When you use public funds and it is executive driven, it is outside of the constitution. And my biggest question is, can this pair who are disobeying the constitution be the ones to lead us into changing the constitution? Why do I say they are disobeying? They have a come we stay relationship, political relationship, because a coalition government, there has to be a coalition document or agreement deposited with the registrar. But now it's a come we stay where the Right Honorable Raila has quite a say in government without being accountable. There also, his party is holding all the positions of leader of opposition, both in leader of minority, both in the Senate and in the National Assembly, but articulating government policy more than government, which means Kenyans have lost the opposition or minority slot, which is supposed to enhance accountability. It would be more upfront to have a coalition so that those slots are then given to those who are not in government. If you cannot obey the constitution, which dictates that let's have a minority.
There's some questions that will be directed to you, which also you may need to answer on that. I'll be raising them briefly. But can we have a short recap from George so that you can go to the question and answer session? We have got several attendees.
Let me then make a quick two other issues. That the glass ceiling for women has been set lower. The big five positions, president, deputy, prime minister, 2 deputies, those are the big five. There is nothing for women because the 2/3, not more than 2/3 gender rule does not apply. CDF and county assembly funds, nobody has quarreled with that, but I want to agree they should be implemented by the executive, oversighted by parliament for them to be constitutional. Finally, what is our priority today? Is it to spend money fighting COVID, or to spend money on BBI. And I want to say those signatures are actually being collected through the offices of the provincial administration, which again makes it not a people process, but an executive process. Because it's good we say the truth, because we are also at Mashinani and we know what is happening. Thank you,
George. George, we can take it up from there also, as you give, before we take the question and answer issues.
I think what I would like to say is that BBI came in at a time when of very significant political vulnerability to the country, but also significant political vulnerability to the two leaders of BBI. The country was vulnerable because there was a fight. I mean, Kenyatta has support, Odinga has support. They have huge amounts of support within the population. And because there was a public disagreement between them, the country and the political process was extremely vulnerable. But the two were also vulnerable at an individual level in terms of their political careers. With Odinga emerging from the 2017 election, and it wasn't clear what his next move would or should be. So BBI became something that then answered that question for him. With Kenyatta emerging from the 2017 election with a very, very shaky hold over the country, BBI also served his personal political ambitions because it stabilized the country to an extent that has allowed some kind of governing to happen. So to that extent, I would say, I would like to make the point to them that BBI served its purpose as a placeholder. It promised more than it could deliver. And that is inherent in the report that it has produced. BBI promised this thing to change the country when its real intention and only capability was to restabilize the country. Because it has done that, because it produced a level of stability, and it also served the short-term political aims of the two principles. I think they should have the courage to say that BBI has done its work, and they should allow the country to move on without BBI. If they want BBI to be the basis on which the country moves on, then they have to do several things. One, they have to actually let BBI go to the market and float and or think on its merits, rather than them pushing it down the throat of the country. That is the first thing. The second thing is the agenda for BBI has to include the real problems of the country. And I think there are three key problems of the country, and this BBI skirts around them. The first problem is we have an unresolved problem of electoral justice. It was not resolved in 2007. It wasn't resolved. We provided for it in the 2010 constitution ultimately, but after the 2017 election, we understand, we are now clear that the question of electoral justice has not been addressed in a manner that is meaningful, which is why we have all this hostility towards institutions that we've established for ensuring electoral justice. So the BBI has got to bring to table a discussion about, do we accept elections as the only means of deriving leadership for this country? If the answer is yes, then how do we support elections to produce real winners and real losers, and how do we commit politically to that process? The second question the country cries for, and the BBI does not address, is the question of political violence. The years and years of political violence, and political violence has victims. People have been killed in generations of political violence, and they've never found justice. There was an attempt to find justice for them at the ICC that failed, and there was follow-up violence, including on Baby Pendo and all the other people that have been killed in the subsequent levels, whatever the types of violence. Now, on that question, it may be that the interests of the BBI brothers are not necessarily aligned, and if they let the BBI go, it will find its level in the market and either fall or rise on the basis of its merits. The third point is the country has got very significant economic and social distress from most recently COVID-19, but even before COVID-19, people are very poor generally speaking, and they've had significant economic deprivation. In a context of such massive poverty and such massive suffering, that is where the national agenda ought to be at the moment. And whatever it is that the country does going forward, those are the three key issues it needs to answer. And I think Kenyatta and Odinga should just accept that BBI has served them well because it has given their political lives meaning, and then allow it to mature into a process that addresses the genuine problems of the country.
Thank you, George. And Millie, going back to two issues that have arisen from Honorable Kibwana's issues and Martha on question of whether this process is inclusive and whether it will remain exclusive, more so when you divide it between political and the legal processes, and noting that the questions that you have raised about the amendments to the legislation can be undertaken without necessarily going back to the constitutional amendments. And also remembering that constitutional amendments can only be undertaken first before you do legislative amendments, which must conform to the Constitution. And finally, the question that you raised, that there is a question of sub judice, and whether when you're doing or undertaking constitutional amendments, issues of sub judice can arise, especially when you're going to change the substratum of that particular process.
Thank you. I don't know if what was the first issue? Sorry.
Honorable Kibwana and Martha had indicated the questions about this process, whether it was inclusive or exclusive.
Oh, thank you. You are talking about it.
You reiterate the question that this is necessarily a political process and it's not legal. And you may raise the question of sub judice, which I said, whether when you're doing a constitutional process like this, question of sub judice can arise when you are doing the very, very basis of that constitutional change, and whether you can run away from that. And finally, whether the questions of the process of legislation that is being suggested in the BBI can be undertaken before the constitutional amendments, so that the substantive of that can arise from there.
Thank you. Let me start by being clear. I didn't say that it is not a legal process. I said it is both a legal and political process. Not just BBI, but even the 2010 constitutional process, legal and political. And the political aspect is why certain aspect of the Constitution ended up being amended in Naivasha, because there were political negotiations. That is a reality of life. Can the public be involved in the political process? Yes. The public can be involved in political processes. But which is the better way for the public involvement? The legal process, because we painstakingly made provisions in the Constitution to ensure public participation. And the BBI also seeks enactment of the Public Participation Act to even further enhance public participation in the process. And so, yes, it is both a legal process and a political process. And none, I can't say that because there's a political process, it takes over the legal process. No. The legal process gives the citizens a voice. And I would encourage every citizen of this country to read the BBI document, to be vigilant, and to ensure that they either speak to their, depending on what process is adhered to, either speak to their members of county assembly or national assembly, or wait when there's a referendum to make their choices heard and known. And there's nothing even at this point stopping members of the public institution in public through public participation. So I did not say that it is not legal. It is both legal and political. The second issue, and actually talking this political, is why we keep throwing the names of the president and Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. And because I'm a lawyer, human rights lawyer, and also a politician, I'm alive to both realities. I'm alive to the political process, but I am also vigilant as a human rights lawyer. And when I was actually looking at this, I am looking at it with both lenses. And I'm glad that you are saying that there are certain issues that don't necessarily have to be in the Constitution that can be brought in by legislation. That is very true. Almost of every issue can be brought by legislation. But does it offer guarantees? No, it does not offer guarantees. As an example, I'll give you the World Development Fund, which was being brought as a legislative issue, because there were very few members in the House who didn't even understand what it was all about, brought it down. It was actually brought down by the House, the legislative agenda. And when there are frictions between members of county assembly and the National Assembly, then it will be brought down if it's legislation one afternoon. But when you entrench it in the law, then it cannot be brought down at whim. So yes, they can be brought by legislation, but it is safer when we entrench it constitutionally. Why are we having this conversation? Because we entrench certain things in the Constitution, and we are not, and that is why Kenyans are actually discussing and debating, because there's a process that is involving Kenyans. On the issue of sub judice, I would want to indicate that what I am saying is that there was a suggestion that Parliament cannot pass this law because the Chief Justice has actually advised the President already that Parliament needs to be dissolved for being unconstitutional. And I'm one of the people who encourage the Chief Justice to do that as a person from a human rights background. But having said that, we must respect the rule of law. I am insisting on that because the matter is already in court. And if the matter is already in court, you cannot then say that Parliament cannot act when we have actually been stopped. But should there be an order from court stopping Parliament, I will be the first to tell you then that BBI cannot go on if there's such an order. But as of now, we are going actually ahead of ourselves as members, we are going ahead of ourselves. But I also wanted to add, in terms of one of the things that Professor indicated, that devolution has actually been strengthened. I made reference to the County Allocation of Revenue Act and the Division of Revenue Act, that the processes have been missing, and that's why even we are having these delays. The BBI process actually provides a framework and a timeline so that the problems that we've been having is an issue of the past. So for me, that is actually something that talks to the strengthening. And even the increase of 15% to 35% is actually a plus for the counties. And I know that there are people who have had, not in this panel, but the people who have said that, oh, but already sometimes we get that much. Yeah, we can get somebody who is a dictator who can decide to be sticking with the 15%. But when you have no less than 35%, it means at every point, we will always have that 35%. And I would also want to add that BBI seeks long-term stability, not short-term stability, as Kegoro has indicated.
Mile, we have a question from a participant, and I think I don't know to whom he's going to address it. Mohamed Weli, kindly call in. We need to have a question and direct it to whomever you choose. Mohamed, unmute your camera. Unmute yourself, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion. And my question is to Millie Odhiambo. I think she seems to be suggesting that the two-third gender issue is one of where you can say we've made progress, or if we make progress, then we should be fine. In my view, the two-third gender issue is a quantitative target. It's not a subjective matter. That means if you don't have two-third, it's either legal or illegal. I mean, if you look at what Millie was suggesting, even if you give all the 70 MPs to women and you have 47 senators, you only have 117 maximum. In a parliament of 454 plus two speakers, 456, you need 150 MPs from one gender. Now, you are short 33. The National Assembly elected 23, and it was a record number in 2017, which means unless we elect 33 in the National Assembly, we will not meet the two-third gender issue. Now, this is one of the most important constitutional issue we face now, and BBI, if anything else, should first of all tackle this issue of gender, two-third gender issue. Now, the other point on the same topic is this 76 will also go to specific areas with a high voter turnout, Nairobi, Kiambu, and all these places. So we are looking at a scenario where women from marginalized areas, from Tana River, from Taveta, from Wajir, from Mandera, will never see the inside of the National Assembly. Currently, we have a situation where there is at least one woman from every county. Now, women marginalization should not be about only at a national level. It should also address issues of the marginalized areas where women are more oppressed than they are in Nairobi or Kiambu or other areas with a higher educational level. So I think,
yes. Mohamed, as you end up, and I think there is a similar question which has been raised, and we need to add that together with the others. Mr. Njeru, could you also call in? We need to have your question together so that we can address all of them together. Unmute, please, Mr. Njeru. Mr. Njeru, are you with us? There is another question from Brian Mawira. Youths were not included in the process of writing the document. We are going through a lot of problems. The youth are not protected by our government. On the list of people that came up with the BBI, no one is below the age of 50. What do you have to say that as you answer together with the question raised by Mohamed, so that we can take the other questions as we get from that? And I think the main question was addressed to you, Millie. And I think, Honorable Kibwana, you can also come in with George as we cap up. We got a few minutes to wind up. Then I'll give each of you to make personal closing remarks before we wind up the whole process. Millie, please.
Thank you. First, let me just indicate that I'm very impressed that the gender issue is actually taking center stage in BBI. And I'm glad that it's actually taking center stage as a thorny issue. I'm very happy as a woman that it is taking center stage, that the voices that are coming strongly, they are coming strongly now in support. What were the voices that are coming out from the ground in opposition? And that has been the consistent language, that the voices have been in opposition. People have been calling the women rights flaggers. They've been saying it's a waste of public resource, remove them. So if there's one positive thing BBI has done, is that it has brought women and gender issues as a positive negotiating issue on the table. So for me, actually, as a plus, that's something that I can take away from BBI, that it gives us a basis to negotiate, to talk. And I'm glad even the other time I had the church talking, and they made reference to the gender issues. And yet in 2010, the gender issue was a factor that they didn't want. But recently I had them speaking, and they were saying that's one of their concerns in BBI. So I'm very glad. And I'm hoping going forward, should there be any further political discussions, please let us be as eloquent on the gender issue as we are now. And having said that, I just want to respond to what Mohammed Welie has indicated. And that's why I keep going back to the political and the legal process. Ask Millie Odhiambo if it was up to me, I would have just gone and on this one I'd agreed with the professor that he indicated, why didn't we just pick what was provided for the MCS and bring it here? That's what we've been trying for Parliament. We brought the bills almost 6 times, and every time we have failed, because where the rubber meets the road, people are not true to these issues. When we say just pick up the issue of the MCS, the way the formula that's been used for the MCS, then we actually told no, don't. So because of that, if Welie says that we are short 33, assuming we get to 23 as we got now, that will leave us short by about how many? 13, I think, or 3. I don't know how my math. No, that will leave us short of 10, which is a good thing. We'll only be having 10 to hit the gender match if we got all the 70. And that's why I said for me, as a woman, the core issue is how we deal with the 70. And if we deal with the 70 correctly, I will support BBI 200% plus if we deal with the 70, the number of 70 correctly. I hear Welie, because I work very strongly on issues of marginalized and minorities. And I can tell you I'm partly minority and partly majority. I am a Luo and I'm also a Suba. I'm a Luo because my mother is Luo. I'm both Suba and a minority as a Suba. And therefore, I speak very strongly on minority issues. And yes, because the issue of 70 is seeking to look at the equality of votes, it will benefit mainly areas, populous areas. And because of that, the numbers that will be added in the National Assembly in terms of minorities will be less. But the gain in the Senate will be higher. So for me, we may look like we are losing in the National Assembly, but the gain in the Senate will be higher. Unless we are saying there's a reason why we must specifically then have that. There are also, of course, suggestions through national legislation that are being suggested to enhance even the women's elections in the National Assembly so that we have more. I want to actually add that I'm very pleased that very many of the people who came into Parliament this time were from minority communities. Of course, this is not guaranteed, but by national legislation, and it's part for me as part of a negotiating tool as women, that national legislation must go hand in hand right now with BBI that will ensure that we have minorities and marginalized women getting into Parliament through the elective competitive seats, so that we have more Sophias, more Sarah Lecoreles, more Lesudas, and many of the women who, for the first time, we are seeing.
I hear you, Billy. Martha, do you have something you can cap up on that issue that has been raised? I think on the gender question, it's very, very important. Then we can have Honorable Kibwana and George answer to those questions if there's an issue. Then I'm going to give each of you some 2-3 minutes to make a personal closing remarks. Then we can have parting shots, and then we can see how to end up this question. Thank you.
The gender issue, I would just like to say that BBI shortchanges women. I will reiterate, and I will ask people to read the proposals in the BBI. Parliament has the final say on the issue of resources. even resources for counties. The Senate has been considerably weakened. So outing women out of parliament is actually outing them from where the national cake is being shared. And there's a very simple way of doing that. Why not change if they were genuine, they could have changed the electoral system to proportional representation, adopting the zebra method. That way we would go to gender parity. For women to be told to wait again, I do not think this is fair. And I do not even think constitutional amendment is necessary. It's just to create posts for the boys, as I said.
You can have,
Over
then you
to
can
you.
wind up.
Hello? Is it me?
Yes, yes, you can go ahead,
Yes.
Prof.
Okay. I think we need to understand that if in the BBI proposals, the 1/3 gender, the 1/3, 2/3 is not achieved, it means that there are constitutional provisions that have not been addressed so far in the BBI, the ones which say they must be 2/3, the 2/3 gender rule, meaning that at some other point now, I don't know where, there would have to be suggestions to delete those existing provisions which say there must be the 2/3 gender principle. Because according to proponents of BBI, the views from the people that ended. So one would wonder now, where would that suggestion come from? And I think Mohammed made a very substantive point to say that, that this principle is one principle on which any constitutional provision, any constitutional changes for the future will rise or fall on. You know, like where we are at the grassroots, you can't even have committees without one that gender, whether it's a health committee, whether it is a project management committee. At the grassroots, they have learned that there must be 1/3 of everything that they do. So it is in parliament where the MPs have refused consistently, as Millie said 6 times, they have refused to accept this gender principle because of our chauvinism, me being, one male in Kenya. So it's not a question of the grassroots. It's a question of these elite men who want to do their thing in parliament without the scrutiny of the female gender in our situation. And I was in parliament, and it was a boys' place. I was in parliament, so I'm also accusing myself. But we need to do better. Then the other thing is the youth issue. The Youth Commission in the BBI is not very different from the things that have been there. The National Youth Council, where there were more government people than the youth themselves, and there is no funding through the Constitution to support that. So we still have to very seriously look at the youth. And to conclude, I really I was very happy with that George told us in terms of a summary. In actual fact, George summarized for us completely what the BBI should be, and I don't think it should be looked at as a 2022 election part 1, because there are some people are thinking that BBI is a 2022 election part 1. But if it is looked at in a historic moment, it was able to begin a conversation. And now we extend it to a national conversation with the electoral justice that George talked about, with the issues of political violence, the economic, socio-economic distress, including the youth issue, including the economic, socio-economic rights that also Millie spoke about before, so that we begin genuinely to say, this is our country. Can we talk together and can we say what has been bedeviling, this beautiful country? And then we now systematically solve it, strengthen our country, strengthen devolution, and we will be like in Korea, those countries. We will go towards a real middle economy and into prosperity. But I can see all.
We lost him, but George, we can proceed as we get Prof to come later. George, I think we can have you to respond to those issues raised, and then I'll give each of you some time to make your parting shots. Unmute George.
The only issue that was raised is, I think there isn't enough time to explain that whole idea about how we have judicialized politics by sending it to by first of all establishing the Supreme Court and so on and so forth. But what that means, the moment you see, the Supreme Court doesn't have to be the mechanism for certifying the election. It could have been Parliament itself. It could have been a Council of Elders. It could have been something else to certify that the results of an election. But the fact that we've sent it to the judiciary to certify that means that it is going to use judicial mechanisms, but it is going to be something that presides over what is overtly a political process, hence the terminology about judicialization. But that then means that the people who are in that hot space of making those types of decisions have gotten certain protections. We gave them the protections, we established them as the highest court, but then those protections have been taken away politically. So that goes down to the question of, we can't now ever have the Supreme Court as a player when this is what happens in around the world. When the political actors, I would say a political party, expects to be in power for a long time, it campaigns for a weakened judiciary. When a political party expects to be in power for only a short time, it wants a strong judiciary, because the judiciary can be part of the calculus for how it gets back to political power. That is why the two brothers, why are they suddenly unanimous about not wanting a strong Supreme Court? Because they view themselves through the BBI process as establishing something that guarantees them sort of a level of political relevance into perpetuity. So the courts must not be in the scene. So those are things to be discussed, and they've got to be discussed in the context of, do elections matter genuinely? And if elections matter genuinely, then we must all curb our appetite for being in power and accept that there will be losers and winners, and the next day will come. So I can maybe use this occasion also to make my closing remarks, so that I'm also able to save you time. My closing remarks would be the following. BBI has done very well. There's a significant number of people in the Kenyan population who are very unhappy with how Odinga in particular emerged from the last election, very, very politically bruised. So to the extent that BBI then provided a context for regrouping for that political side, so BBI has done well. It has also done well for Kenyatta, because it helped him to stabilize a very anxious country and to continue his political program. And it has helped the country, generally speaking, because it has established a context of stability. BBI has also done well because it has provided something against which those who oppose it for whatever reason are reacting and suggesting better and improved ideas on how to manage the country. But I submit personally that it may be that BBI can't be the thing to carry the country forward. It's got to be allowed to go, and the legitimate interests of the country around peaceful transfer of power, around the previous political violence, which has arisen because of an inability to peacefully transfer power, and all the socioeconomic issues that we've talked about. Unless those are addressed, then BBI is not, it's not a genuine way to take us forward. For example, how BBI is seen to, I don't know whether or not that is true, but this is how it is talked about in the political space. It is seen to treat one side of Jubilee less favorably and and rendering one side of Jubilee into the political cold in a manner that perpetuates over and over again the risk of political violence. We can't say that we are genuinely restabilizing the politics of the country if we have a scenario where one group has got to be politically excluded and through unfair means, and then we say that we've achieved political stability. Let me end there. Thank you very much.
Over to you, Millie. I think I will take you, Millie, next so that we can proceed on to Martha later. Millie, your parting shot.
Thank you. My parting shot is that, thank you. My parting shot is that BBI has actually addressed a lot of the issues that are of concern to Kenyans right now. It talks about the socioeconomic issues. It talks about the ethnic divisions. It talks about electoral justice, except we are over-focusing on the constitutional amendments at the expense of the other issues that BBI is discussing. BBI is about long-term stability and needs to forge ahead. And I want to say that let us also limit speculative discussions and let us read on our own, be informed on our own, because a lot of the things that I'm hearing are not actually about reality but about speculation. Finally, I want to say that I'm very happy that the gender agenda is forming a very central stage in BBI discussions, and we might just come out much the stronger. We may not always get what we want. Last time we wanted 2/3, we only got 47 women. From the calculation that is done by Mohammed Welie, we might only miss 10 if we get only 23 elected. And whichever that is, it would be a stride and a positive for us, but it can also form part of the political discussions that I am encouraging that can go on. BBI is both a political and a legal process, and I encourage both. But let us mute the speculations, and let us also not be over nostalgic about the process of 2010 Constitution, knowing that we are 10 years since the Constitution was promulgated, and this Constitution provides an architecture of dealing with amendments. Thank you.
Honorable Kibwana, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, to appreciate this very, very important conversation, which courtesy of ICJ, and I am a long-standing member, and I really applaud your work in terms of getting our country to continuously look at issues of rule of law, constitutionalism, justice, and so on. I think I'll join, first of all, in terms of the gender question. One does not get both the National Assembly and Senate and combine them and then say there should be 2/3 the gender rule respected by that combination. It is each house separately. It is the National Assembly separately, the Senate separately. I think that's an important point to make, like all institutions in the country. In terms of the analysis of George, I think that there is also the question of the president may have gotten stability and the possibility of continuing his work in a better situation. But you see also for his brother Raila, maybe there was an expectation that BBI should have enabled him to win the election, which he has always sought to win. So it will be harder for him to drop the ball because he may probably think that there is something that he hasn't got. But I like the idea you have put forward to say the two leaders should give BBI to Kenyans now so that it becomes an input into the national conversation. If that happened, this conversation that we have never had in our country, from the grassroots up to the elite level, it would really, I think myself, change our country. And that's what we need to focus. Instead of now saying, let us go and collect signatures, and so that some people also don't say they will also collect their own signatures to say that we need more consensus, and it becomes messy. The point about the opposition, I think we need to really still make sure that there is opposition within parliament. So because like now, Kongomano la Mageuzi are saying that they are now the opposition from civil society, because there isn't an opposition, strictly speaking, in parliament. And I really need to finally say, it is very disheartening that people who are simply saying that let us do this better are being targeted. Like in my own situation, I have discovered there is a lot of interest, to the extent that even my residence at Wote is being surveilled day and night, until even grandchildren say, what are these drones doing here? They thought they were kites, until we realize that they are drones. Those things that I don't know, take pictures and do that kind of stuff. That is not necessary. That used to happen during those dark days, and we don't want to have that happening. And whatever surveillance, whatever we say, because we know we are doing things to help our country, we will do them, because we have always done them. Raila did them. We will do that, but it is disheartening.
Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Okay, if you can hear me, then I'll make my comments. And I'll say that BBI is driving us to the dark days. And I want to say I have read the document. I'm speaking from a position of knowledge. I've thoroughly read the proposed constitutional amendments. They do not address the historical injustices, some of which I would say is the historical injustices against women not being able to access the decision-making table. And that is why our constitution has the 2/3 gender principle, which is the beginning, the starting point. It is a journey to gender equality. So when when BBI comes up with a 50-50 Senate, that is the ultimate decision we are aiming at, only that the Senate has been weakened by not giving it a big say in the monies going to the counties. It's also to redress. We would also expect that the historical injustice of marginalization of some parts of this country is addressed. And that's why in the Constitution at Naivasha, I proposed the Equalization Fund, and my colleagues agreed we would want to see proposals that make it mandatory for the government to allocate sufficient funds to the Equalization Fund, so that Kenya, in terms of development and services, can be as nearly as equal as possible. We would also like to see social inequalities addressed. BBI does not tell us how the socioeconomic rights, which are meant to mitigate inequalities, are going to be implemented. It merely talks of how Parliament will report, or the government will report yearly, the progress they have made. This is shortchanging those who are already marginalized. And I therefore think, finally, it does not address electoral injustice. All these issues can be solved by just fully implementing the Constitution. And that would be the real deal for Kenyans. I thank you, and congratulations for this wonderful conversation, and to all my co-panelists.
Thank you all, and we've had a very fruitful discussion this morning, this afternoon. And I need to address, all of us on what has really come out of these discussions. And my fellow Kenyans and jurists, the BBI proposes radical changes to the Constitution of Kenya. It contains a draft of recommendations which will alter the structure of government, elections, governance, and public participation. We have had discussions both on the need for national conversation, inclusivity, and avoiding questions of exclusivity. There is a very great concern that we must at all times try to respect civic liberties, the human rights, and rights of persons, especially as we go on to implement the constitution that we already have, and as we discuss the issues that are coming up thereafter. The biggest question that has arisen from this conversation is that we must have a very serious thought, a very serious discussion in the questions of the gender. The question of gender inclusivity has not been given much attention. And actually what we are doing right now is drawing back on what the little gains that we had, and what has been the concern of everybody, that the gender question must really be discussed and appreciated, that it's a need. We should not go back and say that some people don't want it because they are male chauvinists. This is an issue we must avoid, and we must restrict ourselves from that and ensure that whatever we're going to discuss is going to be very precious to all of us. There is a question that has arisen, which we have avoided so much to discuss, and this has not also been given any weight within the BBI report. That is the question of the judiciary fund, which needs to be implemented appropriately. The question of the IEBC fund. You cannot talk about electoral justice if the IEBC fund that has been given much weight in the constitution has not been dealt with. And another issue that has now come up, we talk about the judicial ombudsman, while we are not giving the Commission of Administrative Justice enough powers to ensure that they can deal with the questions that deal with the public administrative issues. This is an issue that all of us need to reinforce and ensure that this is an issue that will give the public that benefit they want to have, to ensure that there is inclusivity in dealing with the questions that all of us want to have. The question of having an additional person into the Judicial Service Commission as an ombudsman, that increases the number of the executive participation in the judiciary into 5. And there is really no need why that should be done, and then give these powers to the executive who is trying to cloud into both the legislature and the judiciary. We should be very careful when the question of separation of powers is being dealt with, and how and to what extent this is going to affect our situation as we move further. But I want to also remind the persons who have been human rights defenders, people who have been very clear in the rule of law and governance and better justice systems in Kenya. Please do not forget where we have come from, because where you're going, you do not know. It is until we ensure that where we are walking right now is secure, is when we can be assured that where we are going tomorrow is going to assure safety, liberty, and everything for every Kenyan in all walks of life, both the youth, the indigent, the marginalized, and those people are out there. Thank you all. Thank you.